The moment that changed everything for me was a toast. Not a confrontation, not a phone call I had braced myself for. A toast, at my daughter's Thanksgiving table, raised by my son-in-law Kurt, with a wide smile and a glass of something expensive, in the direction of his wife and in the direction of me. To Stephanie, Kurt said, the most resourceful woman I have ever known, and to Helen, who somehow let herself be convinced to fund our dream kitchen. He laughed. A few of the other guests laughed, lightly, the way people laugh at something that might be a joke and might not be. Stephanie looked at the tablecloth for a half-second and then smiled. I held my glass and looked at Kurt, and then at Stephanie, and then at the kitchen behind them. The kitchen I was seeing for the first time that evening, having driven up from Asheville on a gray November afternoon to spend the holiday with my daughter and her family. I had not been to the house on Ridgeline Drive since April. 7 months is not an unusual gap between visits when you live 45 minutes apart and both of you are busy with the ordinary requirements of your lives. I had not thought anything of it. Looking at that kitchen, the marble countertops, the deep-set farm sink, the new cabinetry running floor to ceiling on the far wall, the enormous refrigeration unit humming quietly where the old one had been, I thought, I need to do some arithmetic. My name is Helen Carmichael. I am 66 years old, retired after 34 years as a licensed pharmacist, and I have lived alone in the same house in Asheville, North Carolina, since my husband Robert died 6 years ago. Robert and I were married for 38 years. He was an electrical engineer and a careful man, methodical about most things, and when he died of a heart attack in November of 2019, he left me with the house paid off, a reasonable life insurance payout, and a savings account I had always been the primary contributor to. I have never been extravagant. I drive a 7-year-old Subaru. I make my own coffee. I go out to dinner once a week, maybe twice, and I think about what I order. This is not deprivation. It is the habit of someone who watched her parents live carelessly with money and decided, young, to do otherwise. By the time I retired at 64, I had approximately $380,000 in savings and investment accounts, not counting the house. I tell you that number because it matters to what comes next. $380,000 sounds like security, and it is, but it is not unlimited. It is the accumulation of 34 years of careful decisions and consistent savings and a job I stayed good at for longer than I sometimes wanted to. When Robert was alive, we talked about what it would support, what kind of life, what kind of flexibility, what kind of generosity. We were both the first people in our families to retire with savings, and we felt that as a responsibility as much as an achievement. It meant something to us to have it. It was not abstract. Sandra Osei, who has managed my investment accounts for 11 years and whose office is off Marymount Avenue, reviewed my retirement projections every 6 months. She is thorough and direct, which is what I want from someone in her position. When I called her in the fall before the transfers began, she had said the monthly assistance was manageable in the short term, but advised a defined end point. I had taken the advice and not applied it with enough firmness. That is another thing I have examined. My daughter Stephanie Hartley is 39. She married Kurt Hartley 8 years ago in a ceremony I contributed $11,000 to because Robert and I had always said we would help when the time came. Kurt sells commercial real estate and Stephanie does something with social media brand partnerships that I have never fully understood. They bought the house on Ridgeline Drive 4 years ago. They have been comfortable, from what I could see. They took vacations. They updated their cars regularly. The house was in a good neighborhood. I did not have reason to worry about them financially, or so I thought. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October of 2 years ago. Stephanie's voice was strained in the particular way it gets when she has been sitting with something for a while before calling. She said she hated to ask, but things had gotten difficult. The market had been slow, Kurt's commissions were down, and they were behind on the mortgage. She said it was temporary, just a matter of getting through a rough patch, and she was not asking for a gift, just a loan she intended to repay. The number she named was $1,800 a month, for as long as it took to stabilize. I thought about it for 3 days. I did not call her back immediately, which is not my style normally, but this felt like a decision that needed to sit. I talked to my financial advisor, Sandra Osei, whose office is off Marymount Avenue, and Sandra pulled up my retirement projections and walked me through them. She said the transfers would be manageable if they were genuinely temporary, but she advised me to put a time limit on the arrangement and revisit after 6 months. I called Stephanie back and told her I would help. I told her I needed a clear sense of the timeline. She said she thought 6 to 8 months, maybe 12 at the outside. I said all right. I told her I loved her, and I set up the transfers. The first one went out on November 1st, 2 years ago this month. $1,800, labeled in my banking records as family mortgage assistance. I sent it on the 1st of every month without fail. I am not someone who sends things late. I never asked for documentation of the mortgage situation. I did not ask to see the statements. Stephanie called every month or so, and I would ask how things were going, and she would say slowly, still slow, but getting there. She had reasons ready each time I asked. Kurt was working on a deal that would close by spring. The market was better, but the closings were delayed. They had a month of good news followed by a setback. Each individual update was plausible. I was not piecing them together in a column. That was my error, and I have examined it from several angles in the months since, and what I can say about it is that I trusted my daughter. I trusted her the way you trust someone who has never given you specific reason not to, which is thoroughly, which is to say, without evidence gathering, which is to say, in a way that leaves you exposed if you are wrong. 24 months later, sitting at her Thanksgiving table in front of the marble countertops I had apparently paid for, I began to understand that I had been wrong. I did not react at the table. That is worth saying directly. Kurt's toast landed the way it landed, and I looked at the kitchen, and I felt the cold, specific sensation of something coming into focus that had been soft for a long time, and I raised my glass, and I smiled the way you smile when you are absorbing information and sorting it while your face is doing something else. I stayed for the dinner. I ate the turkey and the sweet potatoes, and I spoke to the other guests, a couple Stephanie knew from a neighborhood association, and Kurt's younger brother and his wife, about ordinary things, the weather, the drive-in on 26. Whether Asheville had changed as much as people always said it had. I was present in the room and also doing something else entirely, which was going back through 24 months in my memory and looking at them with new attention. I helped clear the table. I washed the pans Stephanie forgot to put in the dishwasher. I told Kurt it was a wonderful meal, because it was. I hugged Stephanie at the door at 8 o'clock and I said I would call in the week, and I drove home on 26 West in the dark, with the heater on and the radio off. When I got home, I did not go to bed. I sat at the desk in the small room that used to be Robert's home office, and I opened my banking portal and I pulled up 24 months of transfers, $1,800, first of every month, November through last month, 24 payments, $43,200. Then I looked up the kitchen renovation. This is the part I want to tell carefully, because the arithmetic is important. I had not seen the kitchen before that evening, but I had seen photographs of it. Stephanie had posted images on her social accounts at various stages. I had looked at them and thought the kitchen was looking nice, and not thought much beyond that. That evening, I looked at the images again with different attention. I identified the countertop material as Calacatta marble, which runs approximately $180 per square foot installed. The cabinetry appeared to be custom built with soft close hardware throughout. The refrigeration unit I had noticed, the large one against the back wall, I looked it up by matching its appearance to the brand's current lineup. It was a sub-zero column refrigerator with a wine storage column attached. Combined retail price, approximately $12,000. The deck extension I had seen from the driveway that evening, running along the back of the house where there had previously been only a small stoop, I estimated it at roughly 400 square feet. I was not calculating to be thorough, I was calculating because I needed to know what I was looking at. And what I was looking at, by any reasonable estimate, was a kitchen and outdoor renovation that had cost somewhere between $80,000 and $110,000, a portion of which appeared to have been funded by $1,800 a month from my retirement savings, sent in good faith over 2 years for a mortgage that I had no confirmation was ever actually in crisis. I sat at Robert's desk for an hour and a half. The house was very quiet. I could hear the heat cycling on and off. I thought about Robert, who would have asked for the mortgage statements within the first month. Then I picked up the phone and called Sandra. Sandra Osei does not work at night, but she was very willing to call me back the following morning, which she did at 8:15. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Helen, I want you to talk to a family attorney before you do anything else. Do you have one?" I did not. Sandra recommended Victor Alves, whose office is on Broadway in downtown Asheville. I called that afternoon and had an appointment by Thursday. Victor listened to the full account without taking notes, which I later realized was because he was listening well enough to not need them. When I finished, he said, "What you're describing could be characterized in several ways, depending on what the money was actually used for. Before we talk about options, I'd like you to do one thing. Create a documentation log. Every transfer, dates, amounts, stated purpose, and whatever evidence you can gather of actual use. Bank records, your own notes, the posts you mentioned, a clear chronology." I spent the following weekend building what I came to think of as the spreadsheet. 24 rows, one for each month. Column 1, date. Column 2, amount. Column 3, stated purpose, as Stephanie had described it in our original conversation. Column 4, what I could document about actual use, cross-referenced with the renovation photographs by date. Building it took longer than the hours warrant because I had to stop periodically, not because the work was technically difficult, because I was a pharmacist for 34 years, and the core discipline of that job is accuracy, and I do not allow myself to be inaccurate under emotional pressure. I had to make sure column 4 contained only what I could actually verify, not what I suspected, not what felt obvious. I went back through every photograph on Stephanie's accounts, cross-referenced by the date she posted them against the date of the corresponding monthly transfer. I noted the posts I could not date precisely and marked them accordingly. What I ended up with was conservative. Column 4, in several rows, said only what I could confirm directly. The spreadsheet was, if anything, less damning than the full picture, but it was documented. The column 4 entries made for uncomfortable reading regardless. The first renovation images had appeared on Stephanie's accounts in January, 3 months into the transfers. The countertops went in around month 6. The cabinetry ran through months 8 through 11. The sub-zero refrigeration column appeared in a kitchen reveal post in month 14, with Stephanie's caption calling it her dream kitchen. The deck extension appeared in a photograph posted in month 20, tagged as outdoor living space upgrade. The stated purpose column said, "Mortgage assistance, every row, 24 times. I brought the spreadsheet to Victor, and he looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "This is useful. This is exactly the kind of documentation that changes how a conversation goes." He asked me what outcome I was hoping for. I told him, a clear accounting, a formal repayment agreement, and full documentation on file. I told him I was not interested in punishment. I was interested in clarity and in having something on paper that could not be reinterpreted later. He said those were achievable goals and we should proceed toward them. The thing about preparing carefully for something is that the preparation changes you. By the time I was ready for the conversation with Stephanie and Kurt, I had already processed most of what I needed to process in private. I had sat with the anger, which was real and substantial, and I had sat with the grief underneath it, which was the particular grief of discovering that someone you trusted decided you would not notice. I had come out on the other side of both of those things at a place that felt clear and purposeful. Stephanie called in January to say that things were still tight, and she was sorry to ask again, but would I be able to continue the transfers for a few more months? I said I would like to come and see them in person. I said I had some things I wanted to discuss. We met on a Saturday morning at the house on Ridgeline Drive. Kurt answered the door, looking like a man who did not know quite what kind of morning this was going to be. Stephanie had coffee ready, and she poured 3 cups, and we sat at the kitchen island, on the marble, and I placed 2 things on the counter between us. The first was the spreadsheet, 24 rows on 2 pages, printed and clipped. I had highlighted column 4. The second was a letter from Victor Alves's office on Broadway, which outlined the documentation I had gathered, the total transferred amount of $43,200, and a formal request that Stephanie and Kurt provide documentation of any mortgage payments made during the period in question. Stephanie looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. I watched her read down the column. The color changed in her face. Kurt said, "Helen, I think you may be misunderstanding what—" I said, "Kurt, I would like you to let Stephanie speak." He did. Stephanie said, "Mom." She said it twice. The second time her voice broke. I said, "I am not asking you to explain the kitchen. I am not asking you to account for every decision you made. What I am asking is for honesty going forward, full honesty. And I am letting you know, with Victor's letter, that I have documentation of everything." We sat there for a long while. The kitchen was very beautiful. The marble had gray veining that caught the morning light through the window above the farm sink. I had, in some objective sense, good taste. Stephanie had used the money with a kind of competence I could not help noticing even then, at that table, in that moment. I thought about how $43,200 of my retirement savings had gone into that counter, into the cabinetry, into the wine unit against the back wall, into the deck outside the door, and how the only reason I had not noticed sooner was that I had not looked. Kurt did not say much after I asked him to let Stephanie speak. He sat with his coffee, and he was quieter than I had ever seen him. I do not think he is a bad person. I think he wanted a kitchen, and he let himself believe the story that got them one. Most people are not the architects of their worst decisions. They are the people who said yes when they should have asked more questions. That is, it turns out, also what I did. That is the part I think about most, still, not what Stephanie did. What I failed to do, which was ask for evidence, the same way I spent 34 years asking for verification of prescriptions before I filled them. I knew the cost of getting it wrong. I knew it professionally, viscerally, the way you know things you have learned by consequence rather than by instruction. I just did not apply that knowledge at home, with the people I most wanted to believe. Victor and Stephanie's attorney worked out an agreement over the following 6 weeks. I want to describe that process honestly. It was uncomfortable in the way that any formal proceeding with your own child is uncomfortable, with its letters and its response letters and its formal language wrapping up something that is, at its core, a broken trust between 2 people who love each other. But it was also necessary in exactly that way. Without the structure, without the paper, without Victor's signature and the other attorneys, the conversation would have remained just a conversation, something that could be reinterpreted and softened and eventually set aside. Stephanie and Kurt would repay the transferred funds on a structured schedule beginning in March at a monthly amount that accounted for their verified income. The terms were on paper and signed. Victor filed copies. The $43,200 will be returned, in full, over 4 years. The first payment came in on the 1st of March, 2 months ago. I did not celebrate when it arrived. I noted it. I thanked Stephanie in a text message because I did not want to make a ceremony of it. The payment showing up on time was not forgiveness. It was the agreement working as designed. We have spoken several times since January. It is not the same as it was before, and I do not expect it to be the same for some time. What it is, now, is honest in a way that it was not before, and honesty is what I have always valued more than comfort, though I would have preferred to arrive at it by a different road. Robert used to say that the people who love you most are the ones you should be most careful with, because they are the ones you are most likely to take for granted. He said it about me and about himself, about the ways people who are sure of a relationship can start to lean on it too hard without noticing. He was right about most things he thought carefully about, methodical in his engineering work, methodical in his thinking about people. I miss his methodical quality more than I expected to. I did not ask for documentation. I sent the money without evidence for 24 months because I trusted my daughter and because asking felt like the wrong gesture when your child is telling you she is in trouble. But trust is not the same as not paying attention. Love is not the same as not looking. I know this from 34 years of pharmacy practice, where the two errors that cost people most were not malice and not carelessness. They were assumption and speed. Assuming you already know what someone needs, moving too fast to verify. I looked at the spreadsheet a lot in those weeks after Thanksgiving, sitting at Robert's desk with the house quiet around me. I thought about the pharmacy counter, about the years of double-checking labels and cross-referencing interactions, and asking one more question when something did not quite add up. I thought about how the discipline had been built into me so thoroughly that I would check a prescription twice even when I was certain I was right. Certain was not certain enough. I should have applied the same standard at home. I know that. I am 66 years old, and I know things about myself now that I did not know 2 years ago. The kitchen on Ridgeline Drive is still beautiful. The marble still catches the light the way it did the first morning I sat in front of it. Stephanie will be paying for that kitchen, in part, for 4 more years. I think about that sometimes, and I feel something I do not have a clean name for, not satisfaction, not sorrow, somewhere in the territory between them. What I feel most clearly, on the good days, is the steadiness that comes from having handled something difficult without losing yourself in it. I did not yell. I did not make the conversation about everything I was feeling. I built a 24-row spreadsheet and I drove to Broadway and I sat with Victor for an hour and I printed 2 pages and I put them on the marble counter and I waited for my daughter to read column 4. That is what Robert would have done. That is, I think, what I would want Stephanie to do if the situation were ever reversed. I would want her to be thorough. I would want her to be calm. I would want her to come to me with documentation rather than accusations, so the conversation could be about facts rather than feeling, so we could find our way to something workable on the other side of it. We do not always know what we have learned until much later. I am still learning what this particular winter taught me, and I expect I will be for a while yet. The spreadsheet is still in the folder on Robert's desk. I do not think I will ever throw it away.